So thank you, Archbishop Thabo, and welcome. Thank you for this interview that you were giving for the 16 Days of Activism. Now, those 16 Days of Activism, just for people that are tuning in and don't know, are 16 days that run from the 25th of November to Human Rights Day on the 10th of December. And during that time, it's a time to focus on ending violence against women and girls. It's convened by the UN, it goes right across the world. And we at the Anglican Communion are running a series of events during that time. We're going to have 4 panels and 3 webinars and this great interview with you, Archbishop Thabo, to highlight the work that has been done by the Anglican Communion so far, but also the work that is yet to be done by the Anglican Communion. So thank you, Archbishop Thabo.
You're welcome.
Really Mandy. Appreciate your time.
You're welcome, Mandy.
So, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has said that domestic abuse has spiked under the COVID-19 in lockdowns and stay-at-home notices. And with 1 in 3 women around the world already suffering physical or sexual abuse in their lifetime, what's your reaction to these statistics?
My reaction, I feel numb. I must say I feel paralyzed, I feel immobilized. Because these are not just statistics. These are real people, God's children, God's people, our wives, our daughters, and our family members. So the situation, as he describes it, is grave, and it is shocking.
Yeah, it's deeply shocking, isn't it? It's like you say, when we think about it, who are these 3 women? It could be our wives or our daughters or our aunts or sisters. It brings it very close to home, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, and we know with those level of statistics that, this is bound to be in churches too. And yet we don't really speak about it. There's an element of like silence around our churches in this. So why do you think it is hard for the church to believe the levels of gender-based violence and act on it?
Some are scared, some are immobilized, and some know that domestic violence is real. And Mandy, if you don't mind, let me just talk about my journey. I had an opportunity to work, do an internship at the South African National Council on Alcoholism. And through working there, I was exposed earlier on to what I call a societal crisis and the seriousness of which was only just beginning to be recognized by the church as we in South Africa were moving away from apartheid. And that is the topic talking about, the abuse of women and children. And of course, I had my own experience of this in my own home. And I am by no means alone. For Desmond Tutu, for example, has written of his rage as a young boy when his father hit out at his mother after having too much to drink. And I once wondered if my mother had hidden the extent to which she had shared. She had been abused. And since I was a shrink then, and after all, I once summoned up the courage to ask her. But she said to me, "Hey, Wena," that is, "Hey, you," when she responded, "Who do you think you are?" And I quickly backed off. I saw at Sanka that a lot of gender-based violence was a consequence of substance abuse. So when after graduating, I was asked to become the inaugural chairperson of a new initiative called Tshwaranang Legal Advocacy Center to End Violence Against Women, I readily agreed. But that wasn't enough for, bless her soul, Mali Fakir, a Muslim lady, very dynamic lady who at that stage led a program called Women Against Women Abuse, WAWA, which ran a shelter in a place called Eldorado Park, south of Johannesburg. And Marley said to me, "You who are priests and psychologists talk too much at meetings. Come out and see the problem at first hand." And I did, and I was shocked. And as a result, I became a weekly volunteer at the shelter. I couldn't believe that human beings could be so evil towards others as I listened to stories of men inflicting burns on women, kicking pregnant women. You know, I wept with the women and children as I heard of obscene phone calls of incest, of a boy allowing a friend to rape his girlfriend, and of children being raped in front of their parents. I realized that man, if left to his own devices, could wipe out the whole of humanity. And adding to the trauma was the frustration and anger of reporting a case to the police, then finding the docket was lost, which is where this Toranang Legal Advocacy Center to End Violence Against Women came into being. I was its chairperson, and I was first exposed to the power of the media to expose society's evil when a case of an abuse of a 7-year-old came to court. It was 2 years after our democracy in 1996. A 31-year-old self-proclaimed Christian, I'm going to your question in a roundabout way.
Yeah.
A self-proclaimed Christian man raped the girl. So 2 years later, while out on bail, pending his trial, the man abducted the girl, throttled her to death, and buried her in a shallow grave, all in order to destroy the evidence of his crime. So for kidnapping and the murder, the man was given multiple jail terms, one including of life imprisonment. I had a phobia, and which I think most of the churches are. I had a phobia then about appearing in the media. But the trial was big news, and I agreed to go on a popular morning radio news show. I welcomed the sentence, not as a victory for the justice system, which had been too slow in reacting, but as a victory for the community, which through its lobbying had given the court little choice but to impose the sentence it did. So I think the church is trapped in really not knowing its vocation. The church is trapped in fear, and the church is trapped in not knowing. We need to urge it. We need to say, if you don't speak, many lives will be lost, like the life of this child.
Yeah, absolutely, Archbishop Thabo. That's a really powerful self-story that you shared there. And thank you for sharing your own journey on this. I think each story is a gift to us that we use wisely and hear well, so that it's able to hopefully influence others and enable others to think about their own attitudes and actions and how they would respond. So thank you so much for sharing that and your own personal journey. An amazing privilege in one sense to be able to go to the shelters and see the women direct, and see the impact that violence and abuse has on them, which can often be lifelong and trauma and devastating. Yeah. Yeah. So given this, as you call it, sort of like stuck and fear of the church, what do you think would motivate the church to take action, and church leaders like yourself and local pastors in their parishes? What would enable them to respond to these issues of gender-based violence and make the church a safe space where, people can get the help and the support that they need?
I think what you are doing, Mandy, is very important. We need not to tire. We need to promote days like a Thursday in Black and give again and again fresh meaning, fresh impetus. It mustn't be business as usual. We need, as we have seen during the pandemic, to declare that gender-based violence is a symptom of a sick society. It's a symptom within the church of patriarchy and is a symptom of bad theology. And when I share the story with some of my friends, that's why I started by saying, initially I became debilitated, immobilized. I just wanted to run away. When we give them statistics, they just want to run away. We also need to say, like apartheid for South Africa was huge, was immobilizing, but we need to take it step by step. We need to talk about it every day. We used to compose songs, we used to compose hymns, we used to compose poems. And we need to make fighting gender-based violence within the church part of our liturgy. As Anglicans, if it is read, if it is sung, if it is prayed, it is believed. And we need to look at how do we look at our liturgy, how do we look at our teaching, how do we, who do we ordain at a leadership level? Who do we appoint? I know I'm going to get into trouble with Archbishop Josiah. Who do we appoint as the Secretary General of the Anglican Communion? Who do you appoint as the Archbishop of Canterbury? So who do you appoint as Archbishop of Cape Town? So it's, we need to look at some of those roles. Our daughters, once they can elect a bishop, the model that they have is a male. So I guess I'm saying the journey needs to go deeper than me as Archbishop Thabo around the 16th day of activism, issuing a statement, becoming active, but I need to live, breathe, and show in my everyday life that this brokenness needs to be restored, and it can be restored, and we don't need to feel paralyzed in our advocacy.
Yeah, absolutely agree. It goes beyond the 16 days and into ensuring that our structures are just, as well as, it's classically dealing with it on many different levels: the structural approach, systematic approach, cultural, personal, in our scriptures too, ensuring that we've got justice and equality throughout all of the way that we do things and the way that we operate, and also the way that we are, how we operate with each other. I think a key question for me, Archbishop Thabo, is how is what we're doing affecting relationships? How is what we're doing affecting relationships? Am I building them up into, am I building people up into be the likeness of Christ and being that intentional disciple, or am I diminishing people with my words and actions? And I think that is a good question when we're looking at things, is how is what I'm doing affecting the relationship with others? Am I leading them to God or external? And you're right, it's got to transform all of our structures in society. And that's what we're here for, isn't it? Followers of Christ, followers of Jesus. If it doesn't transform us, then what are we here for?
Exactly. And really, what's the point? We could just as well pick up and go. I know that sounds radical, but I mean, we have to reflect. I mean, I think it is Archbishop Justin or Archbishop Rowan, I can't remember, who said, each one of us as a Christian must be a place where Jesus Christ is revealed. And if we take that seriously, we cannot allow unjust structures to continue. We cannot allow gender-based violence to demean the other, who, like us, is a place where Jesus Christ is revealed. And as you can hear, Mandy, I'm taking the urgency at a personal level. I know it can be very overwhelming. I'm saying if I believe it and act it, it is easy for me to then say, okay, fine, let's look at the structures that are there within the communion, the structures that are there within the province, the structures that are there in a diocese and in a parish. But you have to have champions who believe that gender-based violence is evil, and they feel it themselves, and they want to do something about it, and then they ignite not fear, the discourse of fear, but they ignite the urgency of hope, so that their sense of hope can touch the others, can heal those that are pained by the abuse, but can also mobilize, I'm talking about men this time, can mobilize men to respect women and girl children and vulnerable adults, and to educate each other and to do something about it.
You won't be surprised to say I absolutely agree with you, Archbishop Thabo. I'm deeply passionate about this whole issue of, we as individuals are made in the image of God, and there's only one of us here and now in this lifetime. There's only one Archbishop Thabo, there's only one Mandy Marshall. In the whole history of the universe, we are that unique. And if we don't encourage and celebrate the gift that God has given to this earth here and now, the gift of each other, and encourage that person to be all that God created them to be, to flourish into all that God created them to be, then we actually miss out on the uniqueness and the unique gift that God gives us. And I think that's a devastating tragedy. And when we diminish and abuse, we are losing that very gift of God, and actually in hindering others from flourishing. It's awful. It is an awful loss to the church, I think. And something that we really do need to work on. I think, as the fourth mark of mission says, we need to focus on, unjust structures, and as a, gospel imperative. This is our gospel. Where are we the hope and the light to the world in this darkness? And where are we bringing that hope and light into our churches? And can we really stand firm and say we are a safe space for our churches? And like you said, it's got to start with ourselves. Absolutely has to start with ourselves. Pray. I always say that prayer of David in Psalm 139 is really dangerous one. Search me, O God, and know my heart. See if there's any offensive way within me, and lead me to everlasting. I think if we all prayed that prayer, it's a dangerous prayer, because God might actually say, yes, actually, now you've asked.
Exactly. And there's a retired Bishop of Natal also, in difficult time, took that prayer and then made it also simple, but very challenging. And it goes like, Lord, heal our land, but begin with me. Yeah. Very, very powerful. Yeah.
It is very powerful. So given all of what you said, it's incredibly powerful. What would you say to a survivor of gender-based violence?
Mandy, I will say, I believe you. And then I commit to listening. I commit to creating a space, a very difficult one, Mandy, but I commit to creating a space where the structures of the church, the rules of the church enable you in your time, because if you're abused, you need to pluck up the courage to say it. And some of our rules says if a matter is 5 years old, it cannot be put on the table. And I'm prepared to say, for you who is feeling this way, we will change the law such that we hear you. We will ensure that any matter is heard in a just, fair, and transparent manner. But the essence is, I hear you. I am pained, and God is pained.
Yeah, they're very powerful words to say, I believe you. It's incredibly important what you've said, Archbishop Thabo, is that when a survivor of abuse does disclose it, that we do listen and we do hear. And that's the best first step that we can take, is to say, I believe you. Because often survivors of abuse, as I'm sure you know, will be told so many times that nobody will believe you, nobody will listen to you, and nobody will hear you. So to say, you know, I believe you and I hear you are incredibly powerful words. So thank you for that, Archbishop Thabo. And the opposite of that is the perpetrator of abuse. Now, you know, it's very difficult for us as a church to almost entertain the idea that there are perpetrators in our church. We think, how it couldn't be that person because I've worked alongside them. They're on our PCC, you know, they're in our leadership team. How could they possibly be abused? And it's hard for us to almost get over ourselves of recognizing that actually we could have been deceived ourselves in the fact that they could be perpetrating abuse. So what would you say, I guess, to the perpetrator of abuse, but also then to how a church should be dealing with that perpetrator of abuse?
Mandy, that's a difficult one, because I mean, it most of the time it's going to be people you know, people that you trust, and people that you want to believe also. And then you're going to go into this period of quandary yourself, a double quandary, that trust has been broken. You who thought you knew all the signs have been conned by somebody you trusted. And I think one will need to, again, go back to our formation, go back to the biblical principles of saying, please recognize the abuse yourself. Please repent of the abuse. Please remove yourself from that situation, or go and report to the police or to the church, because the more you want to cover up, the more you hurt yourself and the more you hurt the other. And assure them that if it is in the church, that we will listen attentively, we will ensure that there is an open, transparent, and a fair process to listening to the survivor and to listening to the abuser himself. And it's a difficult one. And one could also say, we are not created out of evil or to do evil. We can do better. And let's start the process of helping you to do better. And that process, it is no cheap grace of saying, just say sorry and that's it. So the process of healing, the process of seeking justice, the process of acknowledgement, is a process of restoration, is a process of restitution, and is a process of education. So to the perpetrator, again, as a pastor, I'm called not to just write them off, because as in the case of that 31-year-old Christian, if you write him off, he comes back and do horrendous things again. So Mandy, I am not coherent there, because if it's my wife, my daughter, my nephew, my parishioner, the tendency will be just write them off, lock them up, let them get the harshest sentence, but that may not rehabilitate the perpetrator. Let me stop there.
Yeah, it's true. It's hard, isn't it, when we look at the perpetrator? We've got to remember that they are made in the image of God too. And justice is required, because justice is a part of that process, isn't it, of actually coming back to Christ. And you're right, it's about, as you said, recognize the wrong that you've done and repent of it. And I think there is a call to repentance there, of actually turning away from the wrong that you've done and take responsibility for your actions and remove yourself from the situation if it's required. I really like those R's that you did there. And it's not in our churches, it's not saying, oh, he said he's sorry, you've got to take him back. Absolutely not.
Absolutely not.
No, because that can be dangerous, and we need to recognize the fact that this is serious and takes a long time. And that's what perpetrator programs are for, is to enable that transformation to take place and to make sure that we are keeping, holding people to account for their behavior, that we don't just believe what they say, but actually we see what they say, and actually their actions have changed as well. Otherwise it can be dangerous to the survivor of abuse. Yeah. Difficult, as you say, Archbishop Thabo, but as a church we believe in that transformation. Otherwise, it's the heart of the gospel, isn't it? Transformation.
Correctly. And I mean, I was trying, as I was talking, to remember the 7 R's that you beautifully said at our provincial standing committee. Everybody's still talking about your input. It was quite powerful. And I was going to try and act clever and remember the 7 R's, but next time. But this, what I remembered was repentance is very important, and for the perpetrator to recognize that what they have done has harmed the other.
Yeah, the 7 R's are: recognize the abuse you're perpetrating, repent of it, remove yourself from the situation, refer yourself to the police and a perpetrator program, make restitution for the wrong that you've done, record any agreement made, and review the agreement with an accountability partner. You did quite a lot of those, actually, Archbishop Thabo.
I thought I got 2 out of 7. I'm doing better.
You got a lot more than that. You got to about four or five, actually, so in different ways. So yeah, I'm glad that the speech was well received. And
it was well received, and thank you so much, because as you may have heard, we took a resolution that we're going to declare Lent 2021 to focus on gender-based violence, and your input and the 7 R's definitely will form a greater part of the process of educating our province and sensitizing our province on gender-based violence.
Oh, that's fantastic. Maybe other provinces could follow suit and lead by your example and actually do the same in their own provinces. Start to outwork the Anglican Consultative Council's resolutions on these issues and put them into practice. Yeah, absolutely. And talking about those resolutions, some people are doing more than others. So what would you say to other provinces that that should focus and take this issue seriously? What would you say to them How would you encourage them to take this on?
I would say to them, the Anglican Communion takes seriously the fact that we are each other's keeper. We are a family of churches, and I'm emphasizing the word family. We belong with each other. And look at when there was apartheid, the Anglican Communion came together, passed certain resolution. They sent an envoy, and to really encourage South Africans that you are never alone. We belong. So we could do what we've done in the past, just like we have declared apartheid evil. As the Anglican Communion, those resolutions are saying from ACO, patriarchy is bad, and gender-based violence demeans what God has created. Let us create envoys from your office to say, we're not saying be the head office and the principal and just tick whether somebody has done or not, but let us look at, in real terms, what have you, as Archbishop, done? How have you encouraged your province? Where do you need help to effect some of those resolutions? And then Zoom and this Microsoft Teams and webinars have been helpful in a way for me, where maybe through your office, you could have, say in Africa, Council of African Provinces in Kapa, to say, Kapa, we're going to have a webinar and to look at these resolutions. And I don't want you to quickly say, I've done this. Let's share what is it you're doing. And the webinar won't be once off. So it's going to be divided into 6. So every second month, we're looking at that. And could we increase? Initially, it will be the primates with you, Mandy, and then looking at the resolution. And then the second phase will be the primates with the leaders of the Mothers Union and any women formation to almost corroborate if the primate was really doing those things in his office or something's really happening. And then in that way, the family, which is badly affected and really lacerated by gender-based violence, will know that we have mutual accountability to each other. It's not just passing resolutions and filing them, but that there is an office that will just say, Thabo, what are you doing? Okay, fine, Thabo, you said this is what you're doing. We're going to get Hope Africa here. You're going to get Bishop Margaret, who is the lead bishop on gender-based violence here. We're going to get Mothers Union here and Mandy, and let's have a conversation around the interventions that you've done relative to the ACO resolutions. And it's not policing, but it's just to help people take responsibility of making our churches safe, making our churches places of healing and places where we can really talk about these hard and difficult matters and bring, as always, Christ to reign in those resolution and discussions.
Absolutely. Archbishop Thabo, it's like you've read my strategy. How it's actually getting provinces to say what they're doing and how can we help one another along this path and what issues are we wrestling with, and like you say, as a family we can share with one another across the communion. Have you tried this because it works here, and this province tried that, what about that, and actually share it. Like you said, is actually encouraging people on and cheering people on, because actually everybody benefits as a result.
Exactly.
And finally, Archbishop Thabo, is there anything that you would say to me in my role as Director for Gender Justice at the Anglican Communion Office?
Mandy, one, I really just want to congratulate you, and as you can hear, I mean, we've taken, let me go back, we've taken resolutions in 2015 to have gender specialists in all the dioceses, and some are doing, some are not doing, and some provinces are doing, and some provinces are not doing. And in my province, for example, how we fund ministries is regulated by the canons of our church. So, but here is a ministry that is not there. So we need to fundraise and do all those things. If in your communication with all of us, you could maybe share some of the templates of what works in fundraising, what works in communication, what works in the programs. Maybe you may hear this in Tanzania and you say, I think it can work in South Africa. You can hear this in South Africa. I think it can work in Ireland. You can hear this in the US. You say, I think it can work somewhere in Birmingham. Keep the information flowing so that we are nourished and we are challenged, and we deal with a scourge of gender-based violence. And I'm saying you will need to spend really more time. I don't want to say being pushy, but but ensuring, because there are so many demands on our table and our plate, and it's so easy to make business an excuse. But you will have to help us reclaim that space on behalf of the communion, and not only on behalf of the communion, but on behalf of those that are unsafe in our churches. You will have to help us be mutually accountable to one another. And you will have to help us maybe look at the Safe Church Network. What are some of its protocols? Where does it work? How can you work with them? And then more importantly, there are many theologians here and social workers and doctors. If you have templates, working with them and putting them out there, that will really be helpful. And I hope, lastly, that you will stay there for long, because it is very disheartening for provinces when they work with somebody and they get them there and they think we're really turning the tide, then Mandy is gone elsewhere. I know we're not necessarily saying we are too dependent, but we say we need a champion. And when you presented, I felt that yes, now we've got a champion. She will need to grab this bull by the scruff of its neck, sorry to use that metaphor, and then and help us move, and so that we defeat gender-based violence. And I hope, lastly, that in terms of the multilateral engagements, the UN women programs, that you will also help us to plug in and make this not only a local issue, but an international issue that can be funded adequately and dealt with as a family of the Anglican churches.
Absolutely, yes. I totally agree.
It's a long list, though, Mandy.
No, it's great. You can rest assured I'm not planning to go anywhere. I'm deeply passionate about this issue, and I do think it is, as I keep saying, that gospel imperative that actually we want everybody to flourish into all that God created them to be as that unique gift. I think it is so important, for survivors and perpetrators of abuse, but us as a church, that we continue to grow into that likeness of Christ and challenge each other in our discipleship, in that way of that journey. I always say that if you find discipleship easy, then you're doing it wrong, because honestly, discipleship is hard work. Because we just get to one point, we deal something out that God points out to us, and then there's the next thing that we have to do, and the next thing that we have to do, and it's a lifelong journey that we have to work at. And I absolutely agree about the UN. In 2013, I was the Church of England representative to the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women, and that was all focused on violence against women, and we lobbied for the inclusion of faith in the response and got it. So now we have an imperative from the United Nations of actually how are we as religious institutions ensuring an end to violence against women, because the UN have recognized that faith leaders and people of faith are really important in actually changing the culture and changing the environment, because people listen to our faith leaders. So the more that we, as you said, the more that we speak out about these issues and break that silence and the shame and the stigma around abuse, the more likely we are about to change that tide and bring about change.
Yes. And then, Mandy, I read today, the beauty of being in this office. From time to time, one gets educated and you get these amazing things. I read a beautiful program. It's called the Daily Program for the 16 Days of Activism for No Violence Against Women. It was constructed by Dr. Miranda Pillay, and the heading is Pause, Pray, and Pledge. And the pledge there, it's just...
Would you like to read it out to us? Can you?
I would like to really conclude by reading the pledge, if that is...
Yeah, please do. Please share it.
It says, a pledge against gender-based violence. I solemnly make the following pledge. I reject the patriarchy and the misery it has brought to women, girls, families, and communities down the ages. I reject gender-based violence, the abuse of children, and especially of the girl child, the mothers, the sisters, the grandmothers, aunts, cousins, and all my loved ones. I reject the practice and culture of rape, of slander, of pornography, of vulgarity, of abuse in its many faces and guises, stereotyping, bullying, smacking, corporal punishment, sexual harassments, inappropriate humor, and demeaning language and snide comments. I reject all forms of violence in my private relationships, including verbal, emotional, sexual, and mental abuse. And I pledge never to commit nor support gender-based violence or abuse in any form or type. I pledge to actively speak out and work for gender justice, no longer as a bystander, seeing it as a women's issue. I pledge to speak up against gender-based violence and abuse of all forms, against patriarchy and sexism in all its forms. I pledge to understand, learn, and be taught about gender-based violence. I pledge to teach other people how we can end gender-based violence so that it will be ended. I found that pledge really very powerful. And I pray that it can be my pledge as I humbly play my part.
Amen. Amen to that, Archbishop Thabo.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Archbishop Thabo, for joining us for this interview. It's really great to be able to sit and chat with you, even though you're thousands of miles away from me. It's great to the technology of Zoom. And we hope that this will encourage others to take action to end gender-based violence. As I said at the start, there's a series of panel events that the Anglican Communion office is putting on. I'm conducting some webinars on domestic abuse and how churches can respond. So please do engage. But as Archbishop Thabo said, this isn't just for this one time only, it's for the rest of our lives. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.